Okay, Mary, would you
Thank
please
you.
tell us about vaccines?
I will, Cynthia, thank you. And you're going to recognize some similar themes and recommendations from what Erica had to say as well. So we had a terrific, everybody was involved kind of discussion about our task of discussing childhood vaccines and what we might recommend for the science community to do to sustain, build, re-energize trust, if you will, all those modifiers around the issue of vaccines. And after hearing a terrific presentation from Diane Griffin, who can't be with us this afternoon, that really laid out a lot of the landscape of what the concerns are, what the facts are on the ground, so forth. One of the first things that came out was that we should be careful in the science community about not being hyperbolic and in referring to childhood vaccines as in a, quote, crisis state right now, because in fact we're not in a crisis state. It was pointed out that over 90% of children are being vaccinated, and this percentage has held steady for a long time. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't concerns, because there are concerns. There's pockets of trouble, and we've heard about it in the media with measles outbreaks, and where a lot of people are aware of experience in the UK where dropping significantly below 90% starts to create a lot of problems, and not non-trivial ones. But there is a danger of fueling the flames by referring too casually to a crisis when there isn't one. So, but moving on from that, and we had a lot of good conversation about that, we got, I think, kind of naturally to one key recommendation, and this echoes some of the things that we've heard yesterday and today about testing messages, the importance of being sure that communication is not only accurate, but is being perceived by the intended audience as actionable and sensible, makes, works with the same vocabulary. Sometimes scientific vocabulary isn't the same vocabulary that a non-scientist would use, and can make things worse, inadvertently make things worse. Now, a good example here is the CDC's announcement around the year 2000 that we had eliminated measles in the United States. Now, that sounds like it's gone. I don't have to worry about that anymore. So tell me again why my child, my grandchild in my case, I'm pretty old now, should be vaccinated against this disease that's been eliminated. It's just really not the right word to use in the day-to-day context of decision-making for parents or others who are concerned. And so simply by rethinking with an audience in mind what the right words might be. For example, it was suggested could be measles has been eradicated for now, is possible, but even better, it's under control. And it can stay under control if we continue to vaccinate children. And that's not an impossible shift to make, but it does require thinking things through. And testing messages can have it can help in powerful ways beyond the specifics about a given public health message that it's time to put out from the CDC or other agency or from a pediatrician's office. We just shouldn't make assumptions about what other people are hearing when a scientist uses a particular message. We should test it. Another recommendation is that the science community should not stand alone when talking about scientific issues that are in the public eye at the moment with some controversy swirling around them, that it is far better and more effective ultimately to form alliances with others in the community who are trusted and who convey trust to their own particular community. And now Eric mentioned the importance of religious institutions in in many ways across our society. But there's other strong messengers that can have impact. For example, can be a celebrity, it can be a respected political figure, others who come out and say, you know, I had my child vaccinated and you should too, and that there's other examples of this, but the point is for scientists to not stand alone, to be part of the society visibly in conveying messages and earning trust. So another point that came out of that, allied with that conversation, was the importance of understanding concerns that, in this case, childhood vaccines parents raise, and others in the community too, specifically the fear of autism. And knowing that this is a concern means that it's ever more important to have discussions among leaders in trying to understand and defeat autism, i.e. the science community, talking with leaders in the vaccine community and with pediatricians to talk about how, not only how we can help each other accomplish our goals, public health goals, goals around health generally, but learning each other's language and being able to anticipate questions and responses. This all also goes in a further direction of the importance of engaging with the public. And a phrase I like to use, I know, is avoiding scientific invisibility. There's a lot of evidence that scientists are invisible to the public. People can't name scientists. They don't know where science is conducted. And the more the science community can do to become visible in the community, in the non-science community, before they're needed to speak out in a specific crisis kind of situation, the better off we'll be. And similarly, if scientists learn early on to use anecdote in ways that can, instead of being dismissive, lead to productive scientific communications, to get comfortable with the use of anecdotes as a powerful form of communication without dismissing science in any way. But to do this early on rather than deer in the headlights moment when you have to answer a difficult question that you really haven't thought through how to communicate about before. So that's something the science community can do. Another thing that was brought up is that, and this is also similar, Erica, to something you mentioned, that doing some research early, or surfacing research if it's already been done, about belief structures and when and why people come to trust or distrust a specific recommendation from the science community is extremely important. Start doing it now with an emerging issue, but do it even if it hasn't been done previously for one that's already out there, like trust in childhood vaccines. And finally, being cognizant, finding ways for the science community to be more cognizant of the context. And some of what I've said is already indicators of this, of course, but a good example when you're talking about childhood vaccines is that there's a broader context of vaccines generally. So think about the flu vaccine, which we all know is imperfect, and from year to year it's more or less effective, and people make decisions in a much more kind of optional way of whether to get that flu shot or not, and bring a lot of different factors to bear. So that is there in the background, whether we like it or not, when we think about childhood vaccines, and there's a range of other vaccines as well. We can't just isolate a particular question and assume that we can address it and overcome public distrust. We have to really consider the social, political even, and certainly the public context of all of these issues. So I want to thank Laura Helft in particular for helping me summarize and invite anybody in our group to add anything or make corrections where I went off base.
Thank you, Mary. Any burning questions for Mary? Yes.
Just a point of clarification.
Sure.
You said we should.
You made the comment about don't dismiss science, and is this a direct reference to the study on autism that was basically considered not valid any further, and that you should not be addressing that, or how did you deal with the discredited study, I guess?
Discredit. We talked about it a great deal, actually. The discredited sources. I don't think we solved it. I think that we agreed that it's very difficult to combat very personable, convincing, generally persuasive individuals, that probably the best way to do that is to be in the same space, also being persuasive and convincing, and to recognize that this is going to keep happening. Yesterday, one of the speakers talked about a book I was shocked to hear this, but I'm not surprised, I guess, that's #1 on Amazon and in books for children, is a book called Vaccines. It's just, it doesn't say why you should hate vaccines or something, it's just called Vaccines, but it turns out I'm told to be anti-vaccine kind of screed, and probably filled with apocryphal or disproved studies. But it was suggested that we should think about getting in that same space, making sure that there's other books that are accurate, that are in the space, instead of disengaging from the debate. And actually, that's a point I should have made that came out, that choosing to opt out of conversation is a sure way to undercut public trust. We have to be able to engage in whatever format is brought to the fore. And I think building that in, this is my own opinion, building in exposure to how to think think responsibly about how to respond to non-science arguments and even hysterical attacks on science should be something that's part of the educational experience of scientists at the graduate level. So they start getting used to it rather than just being blindsided by it. So I hope that helps.
Question here?
Ida.
Yes. Mary, you mentioned celebrities.
Yes.
When we see that most of the time the celebrities are the ones who are causing some of the big problems. So how can we choose what celebrity would be reliable? Like, Mary Tyler, she's a spokesperson for juvenile diabetes, but she herself is anti-vivisectionist. So.
Yep. Well, I think a couple of points of view on this. Celebrities are people too. Scientists are people too. Not everybody's a great spokesperson. Not every celebrity would say what we want them to say. But hiding out or only criticizing, standing back, only criticizing the people who aren't speaking from our script just isn't going to work. It's not realistic. So if you choose, sometimes people self-identify, and we saw that in the measles outbreak recently with some political figures saying, it's really important who hadn't spoken out before, say it's really important to vaccinate your children. So sometimes those folks who are well known, whether they're celebrities or not, will self-identify. You can also, you can find them, but you can't ultimately control them. It's the truth. You don't know, people don't just speak from one point of view. They have a broader perspective. But I think that's why we need more, in addition to celebrities, we need more scientists to self-identify and be prepared to be asked questions that might be a little bit outside their own experience, but which their own expertise, but they know where to go to get to talk to an expert. And Rush Holt said this beautifully yesterday. You remember his anecdote as one of the very few science-trained members of the Congress when the anthrax attacks happened. People were coming to him with a lot of questions that he was truly not qualified to answer, and yet he knew where to go to get the answers for them. So they were respecting him just automatically. They know he was a scientist because it says scientist on his forehead, basically. And there's, we don't just acknowledge that often enough in the broader community, that we are scientists. Many scientists avoid self-identification outside the science community because they don't want to get into conversations that they perceive will be difficult, put them in compromising position, that they can't answer questions. And actually, there's very little, other than anecdote, very little evidence that that's really what happens. Instead, we get the opposite. We get people, when they do, non-scientists, when they do want to make a decision that has a component that they recognize is scientific and they want some expert opinion, they don't know who to go to, who lives in their neighborhood or might be part of their extended family, or is just someone that, that's 1 degree of separation away. And instead, they go to, as we all do more and more, the internet and read about things that may or may not be true. And it's so much better to have someone you know personally whom you can trust. So
Thank you.